Greenland, 80% of which is situated north of the Arctic Circle, is the largest non-continental island in the world. Separated by Canada by the frigid waters of Baffin Bay, it is considered by geographers to be part of the continent of North America. Its northernmost point is the northernmost landmass in the world. The overwhelming majority of its population, over 83%, is descended from the Thule peoples, who emigrated eastward from Alaska over 1,000 years ago. The population speaks a language known as Greenlandic in English, but locally it's known as Kalaallisut, which is descended from the Inuit languages of North America. Though the people and the official language are descended from North American entities, and though the landmass is considered part of North America, Greenland is considered to be more closely related to Europe. Officially, the country is a territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. In fact, it is the largest territory of Denmark, and the monarch of that kingdom, Frederick X, in 2025, is its head of state. Greenland is sparsely populated, with nearly all of its approximately 57,000 residents clustered in communities along its southwest coast. Its central regions are covered by a glacier, which blankets more than 3/4 of its landmass and renders it largely uninhabitable. So, it's a perfect setting for an ice horror story. Its coastline is marked by steep, rocky shorelines and deep, icy fjords. For just over 2 months of the year, roughly May to July, most of the island experiences the northern phenomena of the midnight sun, when the sun sets briefly and then sits just below the horizon, creating twilight conditions during the darkest period of night. The other 10 months of the year exhibit the reverse, when periods of daylight are shortened to the point they become negligible. Obviously, a land north of the Arctic Circle and covered by glacier ice has a cold climate, particularly during the months of limited sunshine, yet the southwest coastal areas warmed by the Gulf Stream often reach temperatures in the range of 20 degrees Celsius during the summer months. In recent months, there has been a spate of interest in Greenland, triggered by the expressed desire of the President of the United States to take over the country. Such a desire is nothing new, apparently. The United States has maintained a military presence in Greenland since World War II, and first offered to purchase the island in 1946 for $100 million. Denmark turned the deal down. Instead, agreements to allow the establishment of military and scientific research stations were negotiated between the two countries, more of which to be covered later. Greenland's history is long and complicated, much of it misunderstood. Its indigenous history began more than 2,000 years BC. Its Western history began 600 years before Columbus journeyed to America. Here is just a small part of its story. Welcome back to Geographics. I'm your host, cosmic horror author Eric Malachite, and today's script was handled by Larry Holsworth, so be sure to show him some love in the comments as you deploy your likes. Share this video with someone who loves learning about historical places, and subscribe and ring that bell. Let's get to it. Let me ask you this. What's one invention you use every day but never really think about? What would you do if tomorrow you had to start humanity from scratch? No electricity, no tools, no knowledge passed down. Well, wonder no more, because with today's sponsor, Hungry Minds, in their book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, you can get an overview of pretty much everything needed to restart civilization. This hefty thing was a smashing success on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, amassing over $3.2 million from investors, and now it's a bestseller. This isn't just a book, but rather a 400-page illustrated encyclopedia offering a fascinating journey through 180 topics that cover the most significant discoveries and inventions in human history. The book appeals to both adults and children and features beautiful handcrafted artwork in the form of engineering drawings and medieval art. It also makes a great gift. So what are you waiting for? Follow the link in the description or scan the QR code, which you can see right now on the screen, and make a purchase using promo code GEOGRAPHICS10. Archaeological research reveals that early tribes of Inuit culture resided in Greenland, primarily in the southern coastal areas, as early as 2500 BC. These tribes were primarily hunters, subsisting on fish and game such as reindeer. Beached whales often provided food, as well as bone for the making of weapons and tools. They created small settlements in the vicinity of Disco Bay, an inlet of Baffin Bay on the west coast of Greenland. Disco Bay, located 69 degrees north latitude, is warmed by the Atlantic current known as the Gulf Stream. Though the prehistoric tribes found it capable of supporting their needs for game and fish, their settlements did not thrive, eventually dying out around 800 BC. Known as the Sakak culture, they are not considered to be ancestors of modern natives of Greenland. A frozen member of the Sakak culture was discovered in Greenland in the early 21st century. DNA analysis determined that he was closely related to the prehistoric peoples of northern Siberia, today part of Russia. Researchers could only speculate on how the man or his ancestors traveled from Siberia to Greenland. They could also only speculate as to what caused his culture to die out. One branch of speculation is one of conflict with another prehistoric culture, such as the Dorset culture. The Dorset were Paleo-Inuit peoples who occupied the lands of modern northeastern Canada and reached northwestern Greenland around 500 BC. They too were hunters, and artifacts of their culture included bladed weapons, arrow and spearheads made of stone, and as primitive chopping blades and chisels made from stone. They too died out for reasons unknown, though speculation includes conflict with other cultures, including the Thule culture. The Thule people immigrated eastward across Canada over several centuries, beginning in about 1000 AD. They are the ancestors of all modern Inuit people. As they migrated eastward, they either replaced or displaced the Dorset culture, which vanished beginning around 1000 AD. In what is today eastern Canada, which the Thule culture dominated by 1200 AD, they encountered what was to them a strange breed of human, who came from the sea. Their weapons were of steel, as were their headgear. They were often led by a chieftain called Leif. It was from these strange visitors that the Thule people learned of the island to the east of their settlements, across what is today known as Baffin Bay. The Thule culture began to immigrate to Greenland around 1300 AD, several centuries after the arrival of the Europeans, whose settlements huddled south of Disco Bay. The population of modern Greenland is mostly descended from the Thule, speaks a language evolved from that of the Thule, and celebrates much of Thule culture and tradition. In the late 19th century, Norse explorers, Swedes, Danes, and Norwegians began settling on the island of Iceland. These settlers and explorers were the Vikings of legend, operating in longboats propelled by oar and sail over long distances of largely unknown waters. On one such voyage, a Norse explorer named Gunnbjorn Ulfsson was blown off course during a storm, leading to his discovery of several islands to the west of Iceland. His reports of this discovery were known in both Europe and Iceland by the beginning of the 10th century, and at least one saga claims an attempt at settlement of one such island around 950 AD. Eric the Red is often credited as the first European to discover Greenland. That legend is erroneous, though he was the first to give the land its name. Eric was the son of a Norseman named Torvald, who had been exiled from Norway for manslaughter around 960 AD. Torvald settled in Iceland, taking his family with him, which included then 10-year-old Eric. Eric eventually married in Iceland, where he worked a farm and fathered several children, among them Leif, known to posterity as Leif Erikson, the first European to reach North America. Around 980 AD, several slaves owned by Eric, known as thralls, caused a landslide which damaged the home of another farmer. An enraged relative of the farmer named Eyjolf responded by killing the thralls. Equally enraged, Eric responded by killing Eyjolf, for which he was banished from Iceland. He fled to an outlying island, leaving behind his symbols of Viking authority known as diasposts. Possession of the diasposts led to further disputes when Eric returned, eventually leading to more killing, and in the end, Eric was banished from both Iceland and Norway for a period of 3 years. Eric knew of the islands discovered by Ulfsson, and possibly the alleged attempted settlement more than a decade earlier. He had also heard rumors of settlements by Gaelic peoples in the islands to the west. In true Viking fashion, he decided to profit off his period of exile by employing his energies plundering such settlements. He set off from Iceland in the early summer of 981 AD and spent the next several years visiting the region of Baffin Bay. He found only remnants of earlier settlements, likely including those of the Dorset culture. What he found convinced him that the region's climate was more conducive to settlement than that of Iceland, including for growing crops. He found harbors and fjords that teemed with seals favored for their skins, walrus for ivory, whales for oil, and fish for food. In 985, he returned to Iceland, determined to mount an expedition aimed at colonizing the lands he had explored south of Disco Bay, which he called Greenland. Erik had decided that a favorable name would encourage settlement. In 986, an expedition of 25 ships led by Erik set out for Greenland, carrying colonists, livestock, weapons, and tools. Only 14 of the ships arrived at Greenland, some turned back, others were lost to sea. The surviving ship captains were granted a fjord of their own in which to settle their crews and families. The captains named the fjords for themselves. Accordingly, Erik settled at Eriksfjord. Though successful at first, the colony did not thrive. The short growing season did not allow enough time for sufficient crops to support the communities throughout the long winter months. The settlements developed into 3 distinct communities, eastern, middle, and western, clustered along the southwestern coast. The settlements did establish trade with Europe, shipping walrus ivory, hides, and sheep in exchange for iron, wood for shipbuilding, and other commodities. By the 13th century, ships departing Greenland for trade were required to sail directly to Norway, which claimed control of the colony. In 1380, the Kingdom of Norway united with the throne of Denmark, and Greenland became a colony of Denmark-Norway. Such a relationship was short-lived. By approximately 1450 AD, the settlements had vanished, though not without a trace. Archaeological evidence suggests several different fates for the Norse settlements, though there exists no consensus. Various suggestions include the settlement's destruction through disease, conflicts with the Thule peoples, raids from other European nations, raids by pirates, of all things, and climate disasters. Following the discovery of the Americas in the late 15th century, the European nations all sought a route through them, especially through North America. The desire to find the fabled Northwest Passage was driven by the need for a shorter and less hazardous route to the riches of the East and its silks, spices, and precious metals, and other goods. In 1500, beginning with expeditions sponsored by Portugal, the waters around Greenland and Baffin Island were increasingly explored by Europeans and carefully charted, with new lands claimed by the competing powers. In fact, Greenland was controlled and occupied by the Thule people, yet the combined throne of Denmark and Norway retained its claims to the island as far as European settlement was concerned. Nonetheless, English, Dutch, French, and Swedish ships operated in Greenland's waters, fishing and whaling. Trade with the Thule people and with trappers and hunters who settled on the island was common. In 1721, a Dano-Norwegian expedition re-established settlements in southwest Greenland, with a trading post and colony at Konkek Island. 7 years later, the colony was relocated to the site of an Inuit settlement called Nuuk. It is today the location of the capital city of Greenland, Nuuk. The colonists were a somewhat unsavory bunch, being mostly convicts, mutinous soldiers, and to keep the others entertained, prostitutes, all banished from Denmark-Norway. The colony endured epidemics of scurvy, smallpox, and other diseases, yet it grew slowly. Other small communities, mostly of colonists from Denmark, emerged along the island's coast, but the bulk of this settlement remained in the southwestern region. In the 1730s, Moravian missionaries from Denmark established a mission in the colony, to be followed by several more in the 18th and 19th centuries. Diseases introduced by the Europeans, primarily smallpox and measles, decimated the Thule population of the island. Though the colony continued to expand through the 18th century, it could hardly be said to have been thriving. In the late 1700s and through the first decade and a half of the 19th century, Europe was convulsed by the Napoleonic Wars. International trade was dangerous, ships subject to predators from the warring nations as well as piracy. Visiting ships to Greenland were scarce. In 1814, the Treaty of Kiel was adopted by Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the kingdoms of Denmark and Norway. The Kingdom of Denmark separated from that of Norway, with Frederick VI of Denmark taking with him as part of his realm the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and Greenland. Greenland thus became a Danish colony, its residents Danish subjects, excluding the Inuit population. Many of the latter had become by that time Christians, converted by the Moravian missionaries. The 19th century saw little growth in Greenland's population. Denmark imposed a trade monopoly with its colony, with all trade to and from the island through Denmark. Protests from Greenland fell on deaf royal ears. The protests were loudest from those earning their existence through fishing. They claimed the monopoly limited the size of their catches and the value of the catches they did achieve. Yet all laws and regulations over the island's economy were controlled by the Danish government in Copenhagen. In the mid-19th century, the establishment of local assemblies was allowed via free elections. The assemblies could address local issues by making recommendations to the Danish government, which bore no legal weight. Denmark made its decisions regarding the colony based largely on the needs and desires of traders and investors in Denmark, rather than on local conditions. No representation in the Danish parliament was afforded to Greenland. Not until 1911 were national assemblies allowed in Greenland, and then two were established, one for the more populous south, where the greatest number of Danish settlers resided, the other in the north, dominated by Inuit peoples. At that time, the population of the island, both European and Inuit, was approximately 14,000 people. Due to the efforts of the Moravians, nearly all of the population was Christian. In 1905, Norway, which had recently become independent of Sweden, demanded that Denmark return Greenland to Norwegian control. The argument took place in newspapers and various European governments, lasting more than 2 decades. A scientific expedition from Norway occupied an area of Greenland previously uninhabited, and named their new settlement Erik the Red's Land in 1931. The Norwegian government at first disavowed the action, though they later changed their mind and endorsed it as part of Norway. In 1933, the Permanent Court of International Justice, a creation of the post-World War I League of Nations, ruled in favor of Denmark. But Norway was not the only nation to covet Greenland in the early 20th century. In 1891-92, the American explorer Robert Peary explored the northern sections of Greenland, which up to then were virtually unknown. At that time, it was generally believed Greenland's landmass extended to the North Pole and beyond. Peary discovered it was an island, exploring much of its northern coast. His extensive exploration of previously unknown lands led to American claims that the region he had explored and mapped were by right American. In 1917, these claims were relinquished when Denmark agreed to sell the Virgin Islands, which possessed an arguably more pleasant climate, to the United States for $25 million in gold, an amount equivalent to roughly $722 million today. In 1940, Nazi Germany occupied Denmark. The action sparked a number of diplomatic crises involving Greenland, the United States, and the British Empire. The Danish ambassador to the United States, Henrik Kaufmann, working with the sheriffs of North and South Greenland, declared Greenland to be a self-ruling country, with himself as its representative to the US government. The latter desired to both secure Greenland from German occupation as well as occupation by the British. Chief among American concerns was the need to keep the cryolite mine at Ivetut, Greenland, out of German hands. Cryolite was critical to the production of aluminum. The United States, then officially neutral, was limited in its action toward Greenland until it declared its autonomy. Recognizing Kaufmann as its legitimate representative in Washington was a necessary step in maintaining American neutrality, as well as recognizing Greenland's self-rule. Kaufmann granted the Americans the right to establish military bases on the island, which also declared itself neutral. On April 9, 1941, the United States and Greenland entered into an agreement which made the island a protectorate of the United States. The Danish government, under the influence of the German Gestapo, stripped Kaufmann of his role as ambassador, charged him with high treason, and declared the agreement with the United States null and void. Both the United States and the local authorities on Greenland ignored the mandates of the Danish king. For the duration of the war, the United States took over much of the role of the Danish government prior to the war, including provisioning the island with foodstuffs and medical supplies. In December 1941, the United States entered the war, and Greenland too became a nation at war. Thousands of American servicemen were stationed on the island, establishing Coast Guard and naval stations, Army garrisons, and Army Air Force bases used to both shuttle heavy bombers to Great Britain and to operate anti-submarine patrols against German U-boats. The Americans weren't alone in stationing troops in Greenland. The Germans did so as well. Meteorological observations in the North Atlantic were critical in military planning, both for offensive operations and in planning to counter them. Over the course of the war, the Germans established several such stations in Greenland. The Greenlanders established patrols, including dog sled patrols, to locate and attack them, or direct other military units to destroy them. At least 4 German stations were established in Greenland during the war. The dog sled patrols were officially the Serious Dog Sled Patrol, and remain active in 2025 as an elite unit of the Royal Danish Navy. It is today part of Denmark's Joint Arctic Command. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Henrik Kaufmann was recalled by the restored Danish government to Copenhagen, initially under charges of high treason. The Parliament quickly ratified his agreement with the United States and restored his titles, with the charges of treason dropped. Following the war, American presence on Greenland gradually diminished, though the influence of the American presence remained. For one thing, Greenlanders had gained access to American trade, including the catalogs of Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck. Autonomous rule was not easily erased with a return to Danish control. The Danish Parliament quickly realized that self-rule by Greenland was an accomplished fact. Gradually, it took on legal status to support it. During the Cold War following World War II, Greenland's strategic importance was paramount. It served as an early warning monitoring station for Soviet ballistic missiles, aircraft, and submarine operations. The American airbase at Thule was deemed permanent, and heavy bombers armed with nuclear weapons operated from there. In 1968, a B-52 heavy bomber carrying 4 thermonuclear bombs crashed while attempting to land at Thule. The accident was controversial at the time, has remained so ever since, and rumors have persisted for nearly 60 years that only 3 of the 4 bombs, which were largely destroyed by the incident, were fully accounted for. In 1997, the Danish government published a report which claimed, supported by documented evidence, that the United States had maintained a nuclear weapons inventory in Greenland during the Cold War, contravening Danish law at least until 1965. It also detailed an abandoned U.S. plan to store and possibly deploy nuclear-armed ballistic missiles in Greenland, known as Project Iceworm. Since the early 1950s, Denmark has ceded more and more authority to a locally elected Greenland government. In 1953, Greenland ceased to be a colony and became an amt, or county of Denmark, equal to any other Danish county. Since then, numerous changes have occurred regarding Greenland and its status as a country. The monarch of Denmark remains its head of state, currently Frederik X. Greenland has representation in the Parliament of Denmark, known as the Folketing, as well as its own locally elected unicameral parliament, which meets in the capital city of Nuuk. The United States continues to maintain a gradually dwindling military presence on the island, chiefly at Bidefok Space Base, on the site of the former Thule Air Base. Bidefok is operated by the U.S. Space Force. It holds the distinction of being the northernmost U.S. military installation in the world, as well as the site of the northernmost deep water port in the world. With the alleged downsizing of American military presence, Greenland is expanding its tourism industry, hoping to attract visitors from around the world. Those who wish to visit may want to consider that Greenland is also the site of the coldest ambient temperature, that is to say, non-wind chill considered, ever recorded anywhere in the world. On December 22, 1991, near the top of the ice sheet, which covers most of the island, the temperature of -69.6 degrees Celsius was recorded. Nice. At a temperature that extreme, wind chill seems insignificant. Northeast Greenland, which is uninhabited for the most part, is designated as Northeast Greenland National Park. It is worthy of mention here only because it is the world's largest national park, as well as the only national park within the Kingdom of Denmark. It is home to a large population of musk oxen, as well as polar bears, Arctic fox, and wolves. The park does receive some visitors in the warmer months, though its regions shelter no year-round human residents. Dispute exists over the potential exploitation of Greenland's natural resources. One is the extent of the deposits of such resources. Some claim extensive deposits of precious metals exist, others claim such wealth has never been found. Whether Greenland holds large subterranean oil fields, for example, is unknown. Yet even if it does, recovering such oil is problematic to say the least. The infrastructure to move it to ports for shipping does not exist. Building such infrastructure is difficult and expensive. Even along the coast, where settlement has been long established, roads are few and far between. The coastline is perforated by deep fjords and inlets, challenging to bridge and thus must be driven around. Hence, connecting even coastal communities is a problem. There is no passenger rail and little freight rail. The creation of new infrastructure would also require a labor pool which the current population would be unable to support. The harsh climate, formidable to both humans and their machines during 10 months of the year, also presents difficulties to those who wish to exploit whatever natural resources the island offers. In short, it's a bad idea. In 2008, the U.S. Geological Survey described Greenland as possessing 43 minerals considered critical by the United States. Yet it did not address the expense of attempting to recover those minerals. Simply put, considering the current technological limitations, making Greenlanders rich through mineral extraction appears to be an expensive operation, and not to mention, probably a fantasy. Whether Greenland achieves full independence from Denmark or remains a part of the Kingdom of Denmark or is somehow obtained by another nation remains an unknown hidden in the future. Until that future unfolds, it will remain dependent on Denmark for its subsistence, on its people for its governance, and on NATO for its defense. The only part of its future that can be predicted with certainty is that it will be cold. Very, very cold there, at the top of the world. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment a historical place we haven't covered yet, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about the world's most famous locations. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.